Good evening, men, and welcome to Men's Ministries on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. We're so glad that you have tuned in to be a part of this, our 12th session out of our study of the book of James, Building Men of Character. And our study tonight is really something easy for us as men to do, and it's known as patience. It's a joke. Don't we all agree that we need all to have more patience than we do? I say that with some sense of sarcasm because it is tough at times being patient for we men folk. I remember back when I was a little boy, at Christmas time especially, and I saw it also carried out in and through my own children, that when they would see those gifts under the tree, it would just get the best of them. Daddy, can't we just open one present now? We'll still have other presents for Christmas. But they knew that we had the good stuff stashed away and somewhere else. And what I understand later down in life from some people, what they would do, they'd search the house over. They'd go on a mission because they thought that there was something more than what was under the tree. And so they would go and find those gifts. And I understand from some friends of mine that they would actually open those Christmas gifts, wrap them back up after they saw what it was, and put them back where those gifts had been found in the first place. I'm saying all that to say this, that same spirit tonight, guys, at times, if we're not careful, it can exist in each and every one of us. Because like those children we're talking about, we don't like to wait. We want things now. We're impatient, and with the touch of a button, with the day of technology that we live in at our fingertips, we can go plop down in our favorite chair and hit that remote control, and the TV will come on, and we can pop stuff into a microwave and heat it a few seconds, and we'll have an instant meal. We just don't want, even as those children, to wait for Christmas to come to see what's in the package. I think tonight it's important for us to look in this 5th chapter of James, and I'm going to read the verses to you tonight, James chapter 5, verses 7 through 12. It says, "Be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and the latter rains. You also be patient and establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door." As an example of suffering and patience, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Behold, we consider those blessed who remain, listen, steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you have seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. But above all, my brothers, do not swear, neither by heaven, nor by earth, nor by any other oath, but let your yes be yes, and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation. Excuse me. The key word I believe that I find in those few verses I just read to you from James chapter 5, is the word wait. Because we can have anything we want now, instantly. The whole idea for you and I today having to wait is such a pain for us. Things like being held up in traffic on Friday afternoon. You forget something. You run over to Wilson and you get caught up at the traffic light. And there's so much traffic on the road, you sit through 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 lights before you're able to move on to your destination. And, we have to be careful so that we realize that, unlike in that traffic situation, that we don't want to not be ready. We'll have to wait until tomorrow for something that we thought would pursue today. And we get to where we're going and we find out that we've got to wait a little bit longer for what we were expecting to be there today wasn't. So we have to go home and come back another day. And I'm just saying that because, guys, we live in a culture of impatience, and it's running rampant all around us. And James clearly shows us in these verses that I have read to your hearing that we need to take time right now and look for a few minutes. And he's shown us this illustration of the farmer in the passage we read to you. That farmer gets out and he does all the work. He breaks up the ground. He sows the seeds. He cultivates during that growing period. And yet he has to depend upon the weather. And James says here to us in these verses that they depend upon that early and the latter rain. And if that rain doesn't come, all the effort that he has put into his harvest will be nullified. Now, like you, I know quite a few farmers, and I'll be honest with you, for the gamble they take year after year and the risk that they put of rains not coming or other droughts that might occur in their work and in their livelihood, most of the farmers that I personally know are pretty laid back. I've known farmers who would get up at dawn and work till dark, and you could hardly get them excited about anything. They were just laid back. It's like patience is built into their DNA and their being. And fellas, that's what we've got to do as children of God. We've got to learn, James is telling us, from the farmer in order to get what we need help in doing along the way. Because we need to be like that farmer, vigilant. And for this very reason, Jesus is soon coming back to this earth. And I want to be found doing what he has called us to do, don't you? And so we've got to be vigilant in our work for the Lord. And if all you and I focus on is now, if we're not careful, I'm here to tell you, we won't be doing what Christ has told us that we need to do. If we're looking for the imminent return of the Lord Jesus and we're living for eternity with our lives, all of a sudden, then we become more enabled to be relaxed and to pray and to rest in God's timing. In this passage before us that we've shared to you tonight, James tells us of the return of the Lord, that it is soon. And if it was so true in the day that James penned those words, just consider how much closer we are to the coming of the Lord tonight. You know, I think that what the Lord wants us to understand tonight and what we really need to talk about is not just patience, but it's really about time. You know, a lot of patience goes back to time. What is heaven's perspective on our time frame that we live in? Well, listen to me, if you don't get anything else I'm saying tonight, catch this statement. The whole aspect of time God has provided for man. The whole idea of time, God has provided for man. You see, God is the God of eternity. So timing is insignificant to him from that standpoint. But in our previous sessions, if you will remember, we have talked about that God, that you and I count time in years. We're coming to the end very quickly of another year. And we count time in years, but God counts time in days. A day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years with the Lord is as a day. So as we begin to realize that God is never late, God is never tardy or delinquent, He always, men, comes through, and He wants us to realize that it will happen right on time. The right time. It will happen. So I'd say to you tonight a phrase that our young people use: chill out. We need to be patient and wait upon the Lord. If you trust me, God is saying, if you walk with me, but you and I, if we'd be honest at times, get caught up in impatience, and we become dangerous not only to ourselves, but to others. And it can become crazy in our lives. So I think the word for today is for you and me, and the words of our young people is to learn to chill out. In James chapter 5, again, I want to go back over verses 10 and 11. And again, this is from the English Standard Version. Listen to what it says. Behold, we consider those blessed who remain steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you have seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. But above all, my brothers, do not swear, either by heaven or by earth, or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes, and your no be no, so that ye may not fall under condemnation. Those of us who know the Bible story about Job, if there's anything we learn in studying his life in the book that is known by his name, we see a life of endurance. Job went through a lot of stuff. He lost his family. He lost his wealth. He lost his health. And this should speak very clearly to each and every one of us this evening. Though it takes us back to where another one of our earlier studies where we talked about in that study steadfastness and enduring. Let steadfastness and enduring have its full effect in our lives. I'm pointing to me tonight as well. You may be completely lacking in things if we don't endure and we're not steadfast as we need to be. I don't want to be completely lacking in anything. Do you? I want to be patient. I want to be able to endure. I want to be steadfast in my service to the Lord. It's interesting how these two verses, James 5, 10 and 11, parallel so beautifully with Job chapter 23 and verse 10, where it says, but he knows the way that I take, and when he has tried me, I shall come out as gold. God help us, men, to let that be true in each of our lives. We're going to go through the fire. We're going to go through situations that we do not understand as men of God and as Christians. But when we endure through those things and remain steadfast, as Job said here, he knows our way and the way that we're taking. But when he has tried me, if we will endure, if we will be steadfast, I shall come out as gold. For as we look at the book of Job, and we are reminded after all the trials that Job went through, his three best friends accused him of several things, none of which were true. Job kept holding on to the promises of God, and he would hold on that God would bring him through those things that were going on in his life that he currently did not understand, and the situation that he was hoping for was going to become better than it had been for him in the very beginning, and that is indeed what happened in Job's life. Now, our concept of God, as we have seen in these studies in the book of James, really determines what kind of men we will be and become. God is trustworthy. He can be counted on. He can be relied on. He does care about you and what you and I are going through right now. Coupled with that one thing, we need to understand. And so I ask you the question, what is our view of suffering? Some people view suffering as giving out of the last two pieces of bread, and you can't make a sandwich for a snack. Others, it's many trivia things just like the bread giving out. But how we view suffering and how we view the obstacles that you and I have to go through and to overcome in our lives, the detours at times that we have to take, the bridge out signs that make us completely have to go back and reroute from the direction that we were heading, all those things that are going on in your life and in mine, do we receive them from God as a gift from a friend? Or do we, at times, if we be honest, consider him an enemy of what we want in the lifestyle that we want to live? So I ask you tonight, how do you define suffering? Some would say, I get to a busy intersection there in Wilson trying to make my way through, as I said earlier, and that is suffering for me. Another would answer, just to get my paycheck, cash it, put it in the bank, go home and just sit back and relax. I've struggled enough for 1 week. I want to tell you, we need to learn simply to trust God. Then we can relax. That way we can trust God no matter what happens in our lives. It's not just a trust thing, it's a patience thing. And if we trust God, we'll learn patience. Hear me. When we get impatient, we get ahead of God, and that's when things begin to fall apart in our lives if we are not careful. James in chapter 5 again, verse 12. We've already read it, but for emphasis' sake, again here, James 5:12. But above all, my brothers, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, that ye may not fall under condemnation. If we say we're going to do something, James is saying, either go follow it through and do it. And he says, if you're not going to do something, say no, and then just don't do it. But don't say you're going to do something and then not see it through. How do we position ourselves then to be honest with ourselves and with God? In learning this discipline in our lives, it will all come down to whether or not we want to be and are willing to be a man of integrity. Am I willing to become a whole person? And am I willing to do that with my life? There are two dangers here. One is grumbling about others. When we grumble about others, that's usually one of the outcomes of someone not trusting God. We've got to blame somebody. The human mind will protect itself. It has to blame something or someone. And if we're not careful, we'll get caught up in doing just like that. We'll get caught up in the second thing also, and that's double talk. We use double talk when we cover up for the promises that we have not kept to other people's. Guys, one of the gravest things that we can, that we can learn from this verse is don't make promises to other people and not carry them out. I think one of the most detrimental things that we as dads and fathers especially can do with our children is to promise to do something with them and then make light of it and not do it. You tell your children, we're going to go Friday afternoon to the park. We're going to have a great time out there playing on all the gym equipment and all that. And it starts raining late in the day. But you made a promise to your children that you were going to go to the park. When you get home, your children are ready to go right now. Might not be raining at the house, but you just left town. It was raining over there. And you say, guys, I'm sorry. It's raining in town. And you break your promise. Can I tell you something? There are places that you could go and take your children and they could still have a fun time. That way, you can't control the weather. That's what I'm saying. And I know that. But when you make a promise to your children, see it through. Do something as an alternate to the very best that you can to keep your word to them. Because I'm here to tell you, I've seen it too many times. A broken promise to a child is considered to them and by them a lie. A lie. But a man who fulfills his promises, his yes, yes, and his no's, no's, is a person that you can trust, and he'll point you to God. Men, one of the biggest promises that any one of us will ever make or has already made, and I did 52 years ago, was the vows that I took in marriage to my wife before our families and friends and before a congregation of people who were there for our wedding. I'm here to tell you that 52 years, and for some of you who are watching tonight by this video stream, you've been married considerably less than I have, and some of you have been married considerably longer than I have. But I know that there are two people involved in every relationship. And while it's not God's plan, sometimes two people just cannot reach that place of give and take in that marriage relationship. And so they decide at some point to separate and go their own different ways. I'm not talking about some young person who's gotten married. I tell you, marriage vows in this generation has so little magnitude to it and meaning to it. They can get married on the honeymoon and decide they're not going to stay married to this girl, or I'm not going to stay married to this guy. And I'm not talking about a troubled marriage that's been through many, many obstacles along the way that would try the very best of us if we had to endure and go through some of the things that they have to go through. But I'm here to tell you tonight that it's those people who just decide that they're going to bail out after having been married just a short little while. Men, marriage is a challenge to each and to every one of us, and we don't need to take it lightly. And I thank God that He has given us faithful partners to stand by our side, and that we have grown together with them through the years, and we understand better today than we did when we first got married the meaning of being steadfast and enduring and being patient one with another. So I challenge each of us listening tonight that you would do your part and that you would submit yourself anew and afresh to your helpmeet that God has given you. I want to submit a couple of ideas as we're nearing the end of our study tonight. I want to say, first of all, that maybe we can work on the number one thing, being willing to say to the Lord, Lord, I'm not satisfied with who I am right now. Help me identify what is making me be so impatient and so stressed out. God, help me. I'm not satisfied with who I am right now. And then secondly, how am I going to change? If that first thing is true in my life, then Brother Willis, how am I going to change? As I begin to recognize it, how I am going to change, I am an impatient sucker, some of you would say, and I need to know how I'm going to change. Then we need to begin to realize that I am going Am I going to depend on my own efforts that will fail every time and they won't last much longer than a New Year's resolution? Or am I going to realize that God, listen to me, another very important statement I'm about to make, or we're going to realize that God has put the source of patience in me through Jesus Christ, who is living within me. Did you get that? God has put the source of patience within me through Christ Jesus, who lives within me. Romans 5 reminds us that in order for us to be a patient person, we need to be kind. We need to be considerate, a considerate person. And we must realize that others really are more important than we are. And we need to do our best to show them a reflection of Christ in our lives. And we need to pray for God to empower us with His Spirit and trust Him so that we're not always uptight about everything and we don't snap everybody's head off at the drop of a hat. We need to learn to trust in God, to let Him lead us, and He will if we will allow Him to. We need to ask ourselves this question: Lord, how many people are being reached through my life? Is my life coming across as someone who is trusting you? Or do they see impatience and frustration, trying to boss everyone around, determined to get my own way no matter how it might hurt others around me? That's a huge thing in our lives today and in our world today, most especially. But guys, it all comes back to trust. Men, if we will learn to trust Jesus for our eternity, we shouldn't be struggling being able to trust Him with the next decision that we have to make, or the next situation that you and I are going to be thrust into, and how we're going to be able to make it through that time. We need to trust God in every way. And again, in the words of our youth today, and I think it really is relevant to what I've been saying to you tonight, lovingly, we need to learn to chill out and let God work in us, then through us, and impact our world for His glory and for our own good. Thank you for tuning in. Let's close our session in prayer tonight and ask God's blessings upon us. Father God, we thank you that you're in control. Patience is not a virtue that most of we men have to deal with. We need to deal with it. But Lord, most of us don't possess great amounts of patience. Lord, I pray that you would help us to be steadfast and enduring, patient and trusting men of God. Lord, help us to truly recognize that if we're not satisfied with who we are and what we are, that we would allow your work to be done in our lives and then through us to become a blessing to those around us. God, help us to impact our world, beginning in our homes and in our family first, then in our church family, in our neighborhoods, in our community, Lord, in our state, and ultimately in our nation. God bless our country. Father, if there's ever been an hour that we needed for you to intervene for America, Lord, I know that we have turned our faces and backs on you, just like other times in history. Abortions have run rampant and Christians have sit basically silent by. Lord, those abortion mills should have been shut down long, long ago by protesting Christians outside those doors. And Lord, I pray that you would raise this church up to be everything you want it to be as we learn to be patient, as we learn to endure, as we learn to be steadfast. God bless every man listening tonight and those that might tune in later. And Father, for all that you do to make it a reality for each and every one of us tonight, we thank you for it, and we ask it in your precious name. Amen. God bless you again, men. Thank you for being with us tonight. We love you. Look forward to seeing you when the doors are open again. God bless.